Hello, my name is Jay Newland, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as the president of the Concord Players. Welcome, and thank you for joining us in our event today. As some of you may know, the Players can trace its roots back to 1857, when Louisa May Alcott and her sister Anna founded the Concord Dramatic Union. The union became the Concord Dramatic Club, which ultimately in 1919 became the Concord Players. So we've celebrated not only 100 years of residence here at 51 Walden, but also our 100th anniversary. In honor of our patron saint, the Players has produced an adaptation of Little Women every 10 years since 1932, so I hope to see you here very soon. The Concord Players is very proud of its continuous record of providing quality theater to the citizens of Concord and the surrounding areas. We produce 3 award-winning productions each season, and through our Concord Traveling Troupe, numerous performances at local nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Each summer, on the lawn of the Concord Public Library, our All the Worlds of Play stage players present the works of William Shakespeare, and we provide material support to the fully productionized and costume productions of Opera 51. Unfortunately, since March of 2020, like all other theaters, we've been dark and unable to provide live theater to the public. Unfortunately, our expenses are still high as we continue to maintain the facility here at 51 Walden, which was listed on the National Registry of Historic Buildings in 2007, and are actually facing a significant deficit in the tens of thousands of dollars, which is why I'm here, to ask for your financial support so we can continue the legacy that Louisa May Alcott started so many years ago, and to continue to provide quality theater, which brings our community together in experiencing shared feelings of drama, tragedy, joy, laughter. As an integral part of the vibrant Concord arts scene, our nonprofit status means your donation is tax deductible. Please go to our website, concordplayers.org. Click on the donate button and see how you can help us. I appreciate any assistance you can provide, and thank you for your contribution. We miss you all very much and can't wait to see you at the theater.
Today's performance is the holiday classic, A Christmas Carol. Originally penned by Charles Dickens in 1843, it was immediately well received and became the much-loved story of the miser Ebenezer Scrooge, who's redeemed through the true meaning of the spirit of Christmas. Our stage reading today will be performed by Johnny Kinsman, who's originally from Concord and got his acting start at the Concord Youth Theater. Deciding to embark upon the arduous task and rocky road of becoming a professional, he took his BFA in drama at the Syracuse University, where he did so well that he received the prestigious Edward G. Greer Award for Excellence for Classical Acting. Today, Johnny is the Associate Artistic Director at the Anthem Theater in Boston, where he produces, directs, and acts in original plays along with classic repertoire. Now this show, this play, this story has held a very special place in Johnny's heart since he was a little kid, and finds that his soul is refreshed every time he reads it. We hope the same for you. So pick up that hot toddy, settle into that comfy chair by the cozy fire, and kick up your feet as the Concord Players presents A Christmas Carol.
Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. Scrooge knew he was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole friend, his sole mourner. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, however. There it yet stood, years afterward, above the door, Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. External heat and cold had little influence on him. No warmth could warm. No cold could chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. Nobody ever stopped him in the street. No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, upon a Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting, foggy weather, and the city clocks had only just gone 3. But it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. The clerk tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle, God save you," cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug. Christmas a humbug, Uncle. You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer. If I had my will, every idiot that goes about with a Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. Uncle, nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine. Keep it, but you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you. There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure that I have always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time, the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open up their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow travelers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it. The clerk involuntarily applauded. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." "Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." "Good afternoon. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon. I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas spirit to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon." and a Happy New Year. Good afternoon. The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood, with their hats off, in Scrooge's office. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley died 7 years ago this very night. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Are there no prisons? Plenty of prisons, but a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat, drink, and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and the workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they would rather die, they had better do so and decrease the surplus population. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. The expectant clerk instantly snuffed his candle and put on his hat. You'll want all day off tomorrow, I suppose. If quite convenient, sir. It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to swap half a crown for it, you'd think yourself mightily ill-used, I'll be bound. Yes, sir. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work. It's only once a year, sir. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, in honor of it being Christmas Eve, ran home as fast as he could pelt. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern and went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. Nobody lived there but Scrooge. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of the house, and yet Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face, with a dismal light about it like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. As Scrooge looked fixedly upon this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. He said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed the door with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for it being very dark. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and double-locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap and sat down before the very low fire to take his gruel. His glance happened to rest upon a bell that hung in the room for some purpose now forgotten. He saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This was succeeded by a noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain. Then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight toward his door. A spectre passed into the room before his eyes. The same face, the very same. Marley. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Though he looked the phantom through and saw it standing before him, he was still incredulous. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want of me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" "In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" "I can." "Do it then." The ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace. "You don't believe in me?" "I don't." "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, or a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." At this the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save him from falling in a swoon. "Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?" "I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?" "It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me! My spirit never roved beyond the limits of our money-changing hole. And weary journeys lie before me." "But you are always a good man of business, Jacob." "Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned? I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first when the bell tolls 1. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us." When Scrooge awoke, the church clock tolled a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside by a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and from the crown of its head there sprang a bright, clear jet of light by which all of this was visible. Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me? I am. Who and what are you? I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. The things that you will see with me are but the shadows of the things that have been. They will have no consciousness of us. What business brings you here? Your welfare. Rise and walk with me. The grasp was not to be resisted. Scrooge rose, but finding that the spirit made toward the window, clasped its robe in supplication. I am mortal, and liable to fall. Bear but a touch of your hand there, said the spirit, laying it upon its heart, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood in the busy thoroughfares of a city. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked if Scrooge knew it. Knew it? I was apprenticed there. They went in. At the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, Scrooge cried, Why, it's Harold Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again! Old Fezziwig looked up at the clock. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, and called out, Yo-ho there, Ebenezer! A living and moving picture of Scrooge's former self. A young man came briskly in. Yo-ho, my boy. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up before a man can say, Jack Robinson, clear away, my lad, and let's have lots of room here. It was done in a minute. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire. In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In they all came, one after another, anyhow and everyhow. There were dances and more dances, and there was a cake, and there were mince pies, and plenty of beer. When this ball broke up, Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. A small matter, said the ghost, to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves praise? It isn't that, said Scrooge. It isn't that. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. What is the matter? Nothing. I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. My time grows short, observed the spirit. Look. Again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a black dress, in whose eyes there were tears. It matters little, to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can comfort you in the time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? A golden one. You fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off, one by one, until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not? Have I ever sought release from our engagement? In words, no, never. In what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit. If you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl, or choosing her, do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. Spirit, remove me from this place. I told you these were the shadows of things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me. Remove me. I cannot bear it. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer. Scrooge awoke in his own bedroom. There was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove. The leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, and a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and great bowls of punch. In easy state upon this couch there sat a giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch and raised it high to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. Come in, and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the like of me before? Never. Have never walked forth with the other members of my family? I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, Spirit? More than 1,800. A tremendous family to provide for. Touch my robe. Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. The room and all its contents vanished instantly, and they stood in the city streets upon a snowy Christmas morning. Scrooge and the ghost passed on, invisible, straight to Scrooge's clerks, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch. Is there a peculiar flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch? There is. My own. Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day? To any kindly given. To a poor one most. Why to a poor one most? Because it needs it most. Think of that. The ghost of Christmas present blessed this 4-room house. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and made a goodly show for 6 pence. And she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes. And now 2 smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelled the goose, and these young Cratchits danced about the table. Whatever has got your precious father then, said Mrs. Cratchit, and your brother Tiny Tim? And Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour. Here's Martha, mother, said the girl, appearing as she spoke. Here's Martha, mother, cried the 2 young Cratchits. Hurrah! Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her. Sit down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless ye. No, no, is father coming? Cried the 2 young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. Hide, Martha, hide! So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, his threadbare clothes brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas, for Tiny Tim, He bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. "Why, where's our Martha?" cried Bob Cratchit, looking round. "Not coming," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Not coming? Not coming upon Christmas Day?" Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke, so she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms while the two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off to the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. "And how did little Tim behave?" asked Mrs. Cratchit as Bob hugged his daughter to his heart's content. "As good as gold," said Bob. "Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much. And thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day, 'Who made lame beggars walk and blind men see?'" Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody. At last the dishes were set on and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, slowly looking all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" There never was such a goose. Eked out in applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witnesses, to take up the pudding and bring it in. Oh, what a wonderful pudding. Bob Cratchit said that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now that the weight was off her mind, she would confess that she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought that it was a small pudding for a large family. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. At last, the dinner was all done. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us." "God bless us, every one," said Tiny Tim. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "Oh no, kind Spirit, say he will be spared." "If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population." "Mr. Scrooge!" Scrooge raised his head speedily on hearing his own name. "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast." "The founder of the feast, indeed," cried Mrs. Cratchit. "I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it." "My dear, the children, Christmas Day." "It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the oath of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you. Poor fellow." "My dear, Christmas Day." "I'll drink his health for your sake and for the day's, not for his." "Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year." "He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt." The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness in it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party. After it had passed away, they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim until the last. It was a great surprise to Scrooge as this scene vanished to hear a hearty laugh. There is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends laughed out lustily. He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it too. More shame for him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece. He's a comical old fellow, said Scrooge's nephew. That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everybody else said the same. After tea, they had some music, for they were a musical family. After a while, they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. "Wow, here is a game," said Scrooge. "1 half-hour, Spirit, only one." It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something and the rest must find out what. He was thinking of an animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes and talked sometimes and lived in London and walked about the streets and wasn't made a show of and wasn't led by anybody and didn't live in a menagerie and was never killed in a market and was not a horse or an ass or a cow or a bull or a tiger or a dog or a pig or a cat or a bear. At last a guest cried out, "I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred, I know what it is. It's your uncle, Scrooge." And indeed it was. The whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it no more, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. Scrooge bent down upon his knee. For in the air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Ghost of the future. I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. Will you not speak to me? It gave no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. Lead on, the night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit. The Spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said the great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead." Why, what was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die. "Goodness knows," said the first with a yawn. "What has he done with his money?" "I haven't heard. Company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." Bye-bye. They left this busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town, to a low shop, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. A grey-haired rascal of great age sat smoking his pipe. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. "Look here, old Joe. What have you got to sell?" "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead. Wicked old Screw. Why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying, gasping out his last there alone by himself. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain." Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening the bundle and dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. "What do you call this? Bed curtains?" "Ah, bed curtains! Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now." "His blankets? Who else's do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without him, I dare say." Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. The scene changed, and now he almost touched a bare, uncurtained bed, and on it, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was this body of this plundered, unknown man. "Spirit, let me see some tenderness connected with this death, or this dark chamber will forever be present in me." The ghost conducted him to poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues. The mother laid her needlework upon the table and put her hand up to her face. "The colour hurts my eyes." "The colour? Alas, poor Tiny Tim." "They're better now again. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. Not for the world. Must be near his time." "Past it, rather, mother," Peter answered. "But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these few last evenings, mother." I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter, "often." "And so have I," exclaimed another. So had all. "Oh, he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble. And there's your father at the door." She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob came in. His tea was ready for him on the table, and they all tried who should help him to it most. Then the two young Cratchits sat upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father. Don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, he said. "Sunday? You went today then, Robert?" "Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday." My little child. My little child. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. "Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. Tell me what man that was with the covered face whom we saw lying dead." The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him to a dismal, wretched, ruinous churchyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to 1. Before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be only? Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Scrooge crept toward it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I the man that lay upon the bed? No, Spirit, oh no, Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man that I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me. By an altered life, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Holding his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he stumbled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven in the Christmas time be praised. I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. They are here. I am here. The shadows of things that would have been maybe dispelled, they will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Suddenly the churches rang out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Oh, glorious, glorious. Scrooge opened his window to the street below. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling to a boy in Sunday clothes. Eh? What's today, my fine fellow? Today? What? Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Well, they can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner? I should hope I did. An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one. What, the one as big as me? What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk with him. Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now. It is. Go buy it. Walker. No, I am in earnest. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with the man in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown. The boy was off like a shot. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He had not gone far when, coming on toward him, he beheld one of the portly gentlemen who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. My dear sir, said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the gentleman by both his hands, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir. Mr. Scrooge, Yes, that is my name, and I fear it might not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me, my dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious? If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I don't know what to say to such munificent—" "Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will." And it was clear that he meant to do it. "Thank you," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro and patted children on the head. In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it. "Fred!" "Why, bless my soul," cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It is I." "Your Uncle Scrooge. Will you let me in, Fred?" Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. Scrooge was at home in 5 minutes. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office the next morning. Oh, he was early there. If only he could be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. The clock struck 9. No Bob. A quarter past. No Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half past his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. His hat was off before he opened the door. He was on the stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake the clock. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time." "Step this way, sir, if you please." It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir. Now I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary. Bob trembled. "A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Bob, make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter at the outset. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
Thank you for coming tonight. As we wrap up our 100th anniversary this year, please consider making a donation to the Concord Players. This way we can continue to provide you with live theater and look forward to seeing you at the theater again soon.